Let me gather my thoughts here. I'm lost. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for clicking on this video. This is gonna be a fun one because in the last video I announced that I made a TikTok and I have over 6,000 friends on TikTok right now, and it just makes me so happy and I'm so excited and I love you guys so much on there. You make my day every single day. But a couple days ago, when was it? 4 days ago. Wow. 4 days ago, I put out a video saying, ask me anything. I'm answering them in a YouTube video. So that's what we're doing today. So these are questions that you guys asked me a few days ago on a TikTok video that I made saying how grateful I was for all of you guys, for my over 5,000 friends, and now there's over 6,000 of you. So that is crazy. So let's just get right into it. Okay, this is the first one. When did you know you needed to get help for your eating disorder? That is a great question. But I think I really started to recognize it when other people around me were noticing that I was struggling, especially like my family and my parents. So the more that they expressed their concerns to me or were telling me that I needed to eat more or that I was losing weight, that is when I really started to realize like, hey, I need help. But at the same time, I was so wrapped up in my eating disorder that I didn't want the help, and I didn't acknowledge that I needed the help, and I was convinced that I didn't. It took a little bit of therapy for me to really acknowledge that I did need help. It's really an individual basis, but I would say listen to other people around you because they love you and they care for you. And that was something that I didn't do for a really long time because I was like, oh, I'm fine. Like, I like the control. I'm in control. And I think that's what it was for me. Like, I didn't want to lose that control. And so it took me a while to really acknowledge that I needed help. But good question. Question number 2. How long did it take for you to recover from mental illness? What type of therapy did you do / what worked best for you? Do you have all day? There's a lot. Okay, this is deep. Okay, how long did it take for you to recover from your mental illness? I'm not fully recovered from my mental illness. I have multiple mental illnesses. I have multiple diagnoses. I've been diagnosed with multiple things. I was first diagnosed with OCD, then I was diagnosed with an eating disorder. I first struggled with orthorexia, and then I struggled with anorexia, and then I've also been diagnosed with anxiety, like generalized anxiety, all that kind of stuff, as well as depression. So, truthfully, I'm not recovered from any of those things, like fully recovered from any of those things. I don't really struggle with OCD anymore, which is a miracle to me. Something that affected me so much that I could barely function. In terms of my eating disorder and anxiety, those kind of came like hand in hand for me, but it also like related to OCD. I don't know how to explain it. It's a very long story. Those are some things I still struggle with. Honestly though, my anxiety is not something that affects me nearly as much anymore. It kind of just depends on like what's going on in my life, what stressors I have, all that kind of stuff. But I have amazing coping mechanisms thanks to years of therapy that helped me so much with that, and I don't live with crippling anxiety every day like I used to. In terms of depression, for me, depression is something that I don't really struggle with very often. It's kind of like off and on. It used to be something that I struggled with more frequently, but with getting a lot of things figured out within my body, such as like hormones and stuff like that, as well as working towards recovery for the other things that I just mentioned. In terms of my eating disorder, that's something that I still struggle with. I would say that my eating disorder is something that's still like lingering every once in a while, but I am definitely like in a way better place than I ever have been. It's definitely still something that I struggle with every once in a while. I think like the main things for me are making sure that my eating disorder doesn't try to kind of like take over or slither its way in when I'm struggling with something that's going on in my life, because it's something that my mind tries to get me to use as a coping mechanism. And then body image is something that I still struggle with every once in a while, but it's definitely way better than it used to be. But the fact that I'm where I am today is crazy to me because little teenage me would have never thought that I'd be here. What kind of therapy did I do and what worked best for me? So I've done different types of therapy. So for OCD and anxiety, I did a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT and exposure therapy. And then I just had like, I don't know what you would call it, just like therapy. I was with the same therapist for about 6 years, I believe, but I actually went to a treatment center for OCD, but that I would say worked best for my OCD and anxiety. And then just being in therapy and having someone to talk to and learn coping skills, having someone that'll listen to you and help you through those things is so important. So it really just depends on what you need and what you're struggling with. I really like this question. How do you deal with the anxiety of eating a lot of unhealthy foods during recovery? Okay, so we're gonna unpack this a little bit. I don't like to think of foods as healthy or unhealthy. I think that's very diet culture, and if you have watched any of my videos, I don't like diet culture. I think diet culture is one of the reasons why a lot of people struggle with disordered eating or have a negative view on their body or food. I don't categorize foods as healthy and unhealthy, but when we're talking about an eating disorder, I know for me, when I had orthorexia and when I had anorexia, I had a fear of like unhealthy foods that like either my eating disorder deemed as unhealthy, or I'd heard from society was unhealthy, or from diet culture, or someone had told me that it was unhealthy for whatever reason. It really comes down to unlearning those opinions and those things that you hear about food that simply are not true. So it's really about unpacking those things that you've learned, unlearning those things that you've learned. We don't need to assign moral value to food. Eating an unhealthy food or a healthy food does not make you good or bad. It does not make you out of control or in control. But I also understand how introducing those foods and having those fear foods and challenging those fear foods inside of an eating disorder recovery, I understand how that can be really difficult and really hard. So coming from that point of view, how I dealt with the anxiety of that was honestly just like having to sit with that anxiety and push through that anxiety until it's not anxiety provoking anymore is very beneficial. And I know that that sounds like, oh, it must be super easy, or I'm not going to do that because I'm terrified. It's okay to have anxiety around food like that. Like, you have an eating disorder and your brain is probably not nourished enough to think clearly and think rationally, but eventually you will begin to learn that you can eat those foods and like nothing bad is gonna happen and you'll be okay, and you're not a bad person for eating those foods. Like, it's awesome to be able to enjoy those foods. I love that, like, I don't even have to think about it and I can just intuitively eat something if I want to. Really just challenging those things and challenging like the beliefs around it and like why you think it's unhealthy and why you think it's bad can be really helpful. Next question, can you discuss OCD along with eating disorders, the challenges, coping tips, etc.? That's a lot of questions. OCD and eating disorders, the combination of them will look different for everyone. For me personally, my eating disorder stemmed from my OCD. So for example, I had really bad OCD and anxiety, and I felt super out of control. I felt like I wasn't in control of like what I was doing, how I was feeling, what I was thinking, all kinds of stuff. And so for me, one of the reasons why my eating disorder developed was because I needed to be in control of something. And for me, I was able to be in control of how much I was eating, what I was eating, when I was eating, how I was exercising. How OCD and eating disorders relate are going to be different for everyone. A lot of times there are OCD-like things that take place when you have an eating disorder, such as like compulsions or obsessions. So for example, like a compulsion could be like having to work out all the time, or having to have a certain amount of steps each day, only being able to eat certain foods. So there's a lot of things that like are similar, but that doesn't mean that you have OCD. So in terms of coping tips for OCD and eating disorders, that's hard just because it like really depends on how you're struggling and what exactly you're struggling with and how it's affecting you. But for me, like the biggest coping tip I could give you is getting treatment. For me, I don't think I'd be where I am with OCD today if it wasn't for the treatment I received, but definitely challenging like your obsessions and resisting compulsions and really sitting with the anxiety. It's gonna feel worse before it gets better. Like, having to sit with the anxiety and sit with the fears is not easy, and it's hard, and it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but doing those things is gonna get you one step closer to having the freedom in your mind to not have a compulsion or not have an obsession. I hope that helps. I know that's kind of a hard one to answer just because there's so many challenges and like so many different coping tips, but it really just depends on like what you're struggling with. For me, honestly, getting treatment was one of the best things, and I know that treatment isn't easy for everyone to get, and it wasn't easy for me to get either, but if that's something that is available to you or is an option, I would highly recommend. Next question, how to start a conversation about eating disorders? How do I confront people? How do I talk about getting help? How do I offer advice, etc.? This is such a great question because I think a lot of people don't know how to talk about mental illness in general. So I love this question. So when it comes to starting conversations about eating disorders, if you wanted to confront someone or express concern to someone who you think might be struggling with an eating disorder, the best thing that you can do is gently approach them and definitely let them know that you care about them, but that you're noticing changes, and you definitely want to have specific changes. Really just having like specifics that help you kind of like back up your claim, because most likely if they are struggling with an eating disorder, they're going to be very defensive. They're not going to appreciate that you've noticed something, because they're going to feel a little bit like they've lost some control. So that's how their eating disorder is going to make them feel. So really approaching with gentleness and love and concern for someone is so important. How do you open up a conversation about eating disorders when you need help for one? My biggest tip is to just be honest and just say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. These are some of the thoughts I have. This is some of the behaviors that I do, and I don't know what to do. I know that I need help, but I don't necessarily want help, or I'm not ready, or I don't know what help looks like, or I'm scared, or I'm anxious, or whatever it may be. Like, just be completely honest, because that's how you are going to get the best treatment that you need for you. Okay, this is gonna be my last question, but there will be more videos like this, so I hope you guys like it and enjoy. Do you have any tips for overcoming compulsive lower movement and compulsive standing? So I'm gonna kind of group this in like compulsive exercise, because it sounds like that's something that you are struggling with. Yes, I do, and it's probably not the advice that you are going to like. But for me, I personally struggled with compulsive exercise while I was in my eating disorder. There were actually multiple times that I was exercising in my room when I wasn't supposed to, and my mom caught me. I'm so sorry, Mom. I am not that type of person anymore. I apologize. But there's just things that your eating disorder kind of just like makes you do, and for me, compulsive exercise was one of those, because it was something that I could control. But my biggest tip is to cold turkey cut out those compulsions, cut out any type of exercise. So in terms of like compulsive movement or whatever that looks like for you, honestly, just cutting that out cold turkey is probably one of the best things that you can do for your recovery. And here's the reason why. Even if you give your eating disorder an inch in terms of compulsive exercise or whatever that looks like for you, your eating disorder is still going to have a hold of that, and it's going to be easier to turn that inch into a mile and get back to where you were. The best thing you can do is cut it out cold turkey, because you are saying to your eating disorder, hey, I do not like this control. It is not healthy, and we're getting rid of it. Is it going to be hard? Yes. Are you going to want to give in to those compulsions? Yes. But listen to me. When I stopped exercising, it was hard for a while. But at the same time, I was able to repair the relationship that I had with exercise, so that now I have a healthy relationship with movement, and it's more intuitive, and it's something that I do because I want to do. And if I don't feel like doing it, I don't do it. You deserve to give your body the rest that it needs, especially in eating disorder recovery, because your body is working so hard and doing so much. You don't want to recover physically or recover a little bit mentally, but still be stuck with compulsive exercise or compulsive movements. And I know that it doesn't sound good, and I'm sure that your eating disorder is probably freaking out in some way, but it's to just cut that movement out cold turkey, because it's not helping you in any way. It's just going to keep your eating disorder having that hold on you. Alright, so those are all the questions I have time for in this video, especially because my camera battery is about to be done. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to leave them down below. I'd love to do another question and answer video, whether that's on here or on TikTok, whatever it looks like. So I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for listening. If you feel like it, remember to like and subscribe. That really helps me with the algorithm and getting these videos about recovery and just mental health out there, because my goal with all of this is to just help people not feel alone and to know that they can recover. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Bye!